I was defined by a single point of failure in my life. Not, hey, it was a failure, move on, and let's see the grace of God through this. No, you're a failure, and you'll never be able to do this again. So that was the narrative in my mind playing.
Yeah, and same thing. But what helped us, as you can tell, we were not good for each other.
Yeah.
We could barely, get through a day without, hurting one another with words. That was when it was so, so important for us to have those mentors in our lives speaking life into us.
Welcome to Crazy Little Thing Called Marriage. I'm Dr. Greg Smalley.
And I'm Erin Smalley. Today, we're going to talk about coming back from crisis in your marriage, something that we absolutely need to talk about.
Yeah, because we all go through those hard moments, seasons. We'll have certain things happen that launch the marriage into a crisis, or it can be a crisis that's been years and years and years in the making of kind of drifting apart. But either way, yeah, all of us have to deal with crises in our marriage. So when you're, Erin, dealing with a couple in your counseling office, so they're going through a crisis, why can this be so hard to kind of come back from a crisis?
Ironically, I've had so many of those conversations, even just today.
Wow.
And, you think about betrayal and trust and how difficult that is to build. Of course, we look at trust a little bit differently than probably the average person, but that's something that needs to be attended to. The vulnerability of if trust has been broken, how vulnerable is it to put your heart back out there? But then if trust has been broken through infidelity, the person who has had an extramarital affair, the shame that's there often keeps them, the enemy keeps them bound up. Resentment, all those things can be such a challenge.
Yeah, I think about it, as you said, just when we go through these hard moments, it's easy to put a wall up kind of to protect our hearts. We can shut down and start to become hard-hearted. And I know for you and I, 5 years into our own marriage, we've talked about this. We went through a really hard season, just kind of reached this place of probably our hearts were both not just shut down, but pretty hard-hearted. And that's
even
a
prior
scary
to
place
5
to
years,
get.
even the first couple of years, there was pain
Yeah.
and conflict was not being managed well. And yes, it definitely impacts both individual hearts.
Yeah.
Later, we're going to share some random marriage definitions that we've gathered. That'll be fun. And by the way, you can send us your marriage definitions at any time. We love featuring our listeners on the podcast, our people. Then we're going to answer a listener's voicemail question on allowing ourselves to be vulnerable again after being hurt by our spouse, exactly what we were just talking about.
Yeah. We have today with us Monty and Jeannine Mora. So their mission is to come alongside couples who are married as coaches and mentors. They have a great podcast. Be sure to check it out called The Favorite Marriage. Monty has been in pastoral ministry for the past 28 years, and he currently serves as pastor of marriage and family at the Ascent Church in Monument, Colorado, some neighbors of ours. Jeannine is a middle school social studies teacher. I don't even know what that means. I couldn't tell you what social
studies.
Yeah, it's like history.
History,
Okay.
yes. There you go.
Yeah, well, let's
Think
just say
back to those
history
days.
teacher.
Yes.
And she gets the privilege of serving alongside her husband as well. So we started the interview by talking about their love story.
I'll let Jeannine go because I think she can share the more accurate version.
more accurate.
Good.
Well,
Very
Monty and
wise.
I, we were in the same ministry when we were young teenagers, and we were in the youth ministry together. And we did youth ministry for a while. We did some leadership together in ministry. And I went off to college. And Monty was the youth pastor at the time. And we were separate for a little while. And I say that when he realized I was gone, he realized he was missing what he needed in his life. So he did reel me back in from college. And we started our relationship after that.
Nice. So it was quickly, once you were separated distance-wise, you realized that, man, this girl, this is what I want.
She came home for Thanksgiving break after her first year of college, and I looked at her and I said, the flower has bloomed. Yes. And asked the question.
He didn't say that to you, though, did he?
No,
Those are his exact
he was
words.
thinking that
I was-
on the inside.
And I remember asking her, like, just to start the conversation about maybe dating. I said, well, I don't think we ever dated before. And so that was the conversation. And
Yeah.
before you know it,
Mm.
that was it.
Because she said you were so mature, you had so much
Oh,
growing
I
up to
did.
do.
I actually
and-
didn't like him very much. I thought he
She
was very
didn't know.
arrogant, but I loved him as my youth pastor, and I valued his input in my life. And matter of fact, he sat across the table and helped me through some really bad relationships. And I think the same for you. Like, we talked to each other about
Yeah.
these
It's what-
bad
the right
relationships,
time.
and we never thought of each other.
Right.
And so that's why he said, why have we never dated? I'm like, I don't know. We might need to try that when I go
Did you
down.
try that?
Yeah, when I went down, for Thanksgiving, we went with some friends. We went as a group, but he moved really fast because we went to a movie, and in the movie, he started feeding me chips. Like, mind you, my youth
Not
pastor
popcorn.
feeding me
Shells.
chips, and
Really?
I'm just like, what is this guy doing?
Because she was hungry.
Oh,
you
you
knew
knew
that.
she
You
was
could
hungry.
tell.
Yes.
But that was it.
You could
It
hear
was
the stomach
Yes.
rumbling.
Lay's potato chips. That's what started the.
So that's now your anniversary treat, right? That you just sit around and
Eat some
feed each
Lay's,
other
yeah.
Yeah,
chips,
chips.
some Lay's potato chips.
Yeah.
So then you end up getting married. How did
Mhm.
early marriage go for you guys?
Wow, it was crazy because when we got married, September 1, 95, I was pastoring single our first church. I was the lead pastor of our first church. I was
Oh,
24.
wow.
Jeannine was 20. I was already in full-time lead pastor role.
Wow.
And so obviously we don't suggest that to anybody out there now, this day and age.
No.
Especially
so-
your children, right?
Especially
Right.
yeah.
No, being at that
Okay, but wait.
age.
So which part of that? Sorry,
No,
which part of that do you not recommend? It just the young age, or what? What was, like Erin was saying? What was the big challenge there?
Getting married and being in ministry, full-time ministry right away. So
Mhm,
not
mhm.
having that opportunity, like most couples, they
Mhm.
have a year, couple years to really focus on their marriage, really build their
Gotcha.
marriage.
Mhm.
We didn't have that. We had the not the burden, but the responsibility of
Mhm.
pastoring an entire church, trying to take on a new marriage as
Yeah.
well.
At such a young
Interesting.
age.
Yeah.
And we also didn't have premarital counseling, so that was
Ah.
huge. Like, I came right out of college. We started working together in youth ministry again. Our senior pastor moved to another church and basically handed him the mantle and asked him. And he came to me in the middle of our wedding planning and
Oh,
said, "This
perfect
is
time.
this is what's happening, and are you good with this?" And I mean, I loved him. I loved the Lord, and I said, "Why not? Let's do this." And we did not. I mean, we started off well.
Yeah.
A lot of
Mhm.
people said, like, the first 2 years of marriage are the hardest.
Mhm.
I feel like we did not feel that. Like, the first 2 years of
That's
marriage
what Lay's
seemed,
potato chips will
Yeah,
do
yeah,
for you,
yeah, for
apparently.
sure. And it was, I thought was good, but little did we know, it seemed good,
Mhm.
but there was things falling apart,
Mm.
behind the scenes, because we weren't investing into each other, which
Mhm.
is the lead into our
Yeah.
crisis 5 years in.
Yeah. So talk about that, because I remember that from our time,
Yeah.
Mhm.
just eating, sharing a meal together.
Mm.
Did you have chips?
They weren't Lay's, so I think we did have some chips. So that's our
Yeah.
thing now. See,
Yeah.
I'm included in this.
There was some salsa,
Chip.
a little bit of salsa involved in
Yeah,
that.
this
Yeah.
chip
Nice.
passion.
Chips and salsa.
So it
Yeah.
sounds like, yeah, the first 2 years, although starting a new marriage with, shepherding a church,
Mhm.
certainly I could see where that could provide
Yes.
some difficulties, but it sounded like there were some things that weren't happening that led ultimately, right, to a really hard season for you guys, or you hit a real crisis. Kind of walk us through what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, man, so the crisis that happened 5 years into the marriage there was the perfect storm brewing in the background. So our youthfulness,
Mhm.
taking on full-time ministry, We had 2 children, 1 child 2 years of age, 1 under 1. So
Okay.
Wow.
diapers and the whole thing.
Yeah.
Trying to learn how to be young parents.
Mm-hmm.
All of this, we were young. The lack of communication, the financial strain, being in ministry young. I mean, there was a lot of these things, unhealthy temptations, lack of sexual integrity.
Our
A
own
lot of
identity.
our
We were
own
trying
identity.
to find our own identity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
20 somethings or
Makes
tried to
sense,
figure that
yeah.
out anyway.
Yeah. So all of those things converged to where we are 5 years into the marriage, also into the pastorate, to where we crashed. We realized that we cannot do that, and it came to a point to where we had to resign our church, and we resigned our church, ended up moving away, and we took the next 2 years to go through some healing and some restoration in our own marriage relationship. But it was tough in that context as well, because when you go through a marriage crisis and you're not in the public eye, it's a little bit different. But when you're in the public eye as a pastor in ministry,
Kind of in the fishbowl. so
you're
to
in the
speak.
fishbowl. Yeah.
Everybody's looking, watching, noticing.
And when we went into our healing time in the church where we were looking for that healing, they didn't know how to even treat us because we were pastors within their region. And so the way they looked at us was so different. And then it was just like people didn't know how to approach us and talk to us when we needed people the most at that time. I remember one service we were sitting there and I was so broken and just crying in my seat and thinking, how are we here? We gave our lives to God and we surrendered and we said yes. Like, how are we here? And a lady tapped me on the shoulder and I thought she was going to reach over and pray for me. And she asked me if I could go work in the nursery because because they were short staffed.
Oh, gosh.
And I got
I
up
noticed
and
you're crying,
Yeah.
yeah.
but
We need
you
to help
think
the
me. Yeah.
So that was the point. We got up. I got up. I went and got our 2 babies and we walked out and never went back.
Wow.
And maybe that wasn't the right way to leave. I know that wasn't. I look back now and we think we did so many things wrong. And the grace of God just still carried us to the right place to get healed. But yeah, the things like that where it was just, people just see you as so strong. Like,
Right.
well, they're pastors before. She can take care of a few toddlers.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's your
It was-
duty.
So
Yeah.
through that season of healing, what did that look like practically? What did you guys do intentionally to pursue healing, both individually as well as in the marriage?
Yeah. Well, we attempted to have a couple sessions with our pastor up in Denver, and it was at a point to where they just kind of looked at us and said, "This is not our forte. We don't know how to help. We ex-pastors, what you guys are going through." So they referred us out to a marriage resource, to a beautiful, beautiful marriage ministry, beautiful couple. And it was that marriage mentor couple, 1 and 2, and the marriage course that really did the deep work, that really, for the next 14 weeks, we really dived into that. So it was through just the personal work that God was doing in our lives, learning how to communicate properly, which we never really learned that as a young couple. We learned how to have the hard conversations about life and even our past, things in our past that we brought into the marriage that really impacted what we were going through.
Yes.
Forgiveness issues, trust issues. I mean, there was a lot of different personal things that we had to work on. But ultimately, it was the marriage course we were going through, and these beautiful marriage mentors God brought into our life.
I love
Just
that.
man, without them, without having them in our life, we don't know if we would have really made it through that journey.
Yeah. Well, hearing their crisis and what they went through is what gave us hope. And they went through, we feel like, way worse than at the time. We were like, well, wait, if they went through that, we can get through this. And I think, that's what kept us moving forward, is they were willing to be open and transparent and say, this is what our life looked like. This is what God did. And he can do it for you. And we wanted that healing immediately. I remember sitting with that couple and the wife turning to me and she says, this isn't going to happen overnight. And I looked at her and I was like, but why? Because this hurts so bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can last a year or 2 years. And she looked at me and just spoke to me and gave me words of encouragement and said, you will, you can, and he's here for you, not alone. And just moment by moment, week by week, month by month, after a couple years, we were in the class. We started teaching the class that we went through, and here we are today, passionate about telling our story so that people can have hope.
Yeah. So take us back to kind of that hard season when things were really unraveling and you were both realizing, man, this is really hard, not sure what to do. Kind of as you look back, what you talked about communication certainly being one. You've kind of mentioned, but what else was going on for you guys in the relationship, just maybe even individually? What was really creating kind of that feeling stuck or just taking you down to depression, whatever it was?
Yeah, for us, it was misaligned priorities.
Okay.
So early on, because when we were married, we were already into the ministry. Yeah. Ministry became the priority, became the prize.
Yeah.
We found our identity in the titles of pastor, wife, and that became our God, our mistress, right? And so marriage was put on the back burner. Then we introduced children into the mix, and now how are we going to prioritize God, ministry, marriage, parenting, all these things? So our priorities were out of whack.
Okay.
And I think because we didn't have the right priorities in place, that's when things started crumbling, because we didn't have the good foundation, right? And we didn't know how to work through some of those things, not having premarital counseling. And here we were in pastoral ministry, not having any type of premarital work on our own lives. Yeah. And so everything was it was the perfect storm, but it was back down to like, we just had our priorities out of order. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it sounded like through that, so priorities are misaligned, and then the talking about it sounded like it was really, really hard. You just didn't communicate well through all that, probably.
Yeah, Jeannine, what was that like for you as a wife, as a mom?
My identity was crushed at the time. For a young lady, 21 years old, just trying to figure out who I was, and putting him in a place that that for him to feed into me, like who I am, and his wife, and putting a lot of expectation on him instead of on God, and finding that in God. And I didn't do that very well. I didn't do that very well because I was so focused on what other people were thinking about me, and just having women's meetings and women telling me, you shouldn't sit like that, you're a pastor's wife, and I'm just like really just trying to figure out who is this, like who am I and how am I supposed to act. And then I had children come in, and being late to church, and I would get the eyes, and people would say something because the pastor's wife was late to church, and I'm just trying to bring in a 2-year-old and she's trying to survive children. There was so much expectation on me, and I leaned to him to help me and build me up. And when our world crashed, when there was the mistress and the just the betrayal in that, it crushed me, and I couldn't see a way out of it. I began to hate the church. I began to hate him. I began to hate anything about ministry. And I put all my focus on my children, and I poured into them. And then they became my number one, which still is not the right place, because it's God, our marriage, and then our children. But that's where I lived for quite a while, and putting all my effort into our kids.
But I think that's what kept you in the marriage too.
Yes, it was.
Our kids. We always say to couples who are going through a crisis, find a reason, any reason. And your reason was, and her reason was the children. And eventually it had to the focus had to change from them to us. But
Yeah.
that was pretty huge for you.
Yeah, my lowest low,
That's good.
and I thought about taking my life. I actually tried overdosing on pills. Thank God that His grace was there and He saved me, and it was an eye opener to focusing on just me. I had to, like the psalmist in Psalm 77, where he is just all about me. I see this. I've focused on all these things, me, and what's going on with me. And then there was that transition in the psalm where he then began to fix his eyes on God and what He can do. That was my moment, and I thought it's not about just me, and turned my focus outward. And then my kids were the motivation, because I began to see, like, this is a bigger picture than just Jeannine. And if I can just surrender this to God, He's going to do something. And He was willing. His repentance and His willing to change and willing to refocus was also motivation, because without that, I don't know that I could have stayed. So both of us surrendering and saying, God, take our mess and make it a message. He did. He has taken us through that journey, and now we have this big picture that we're seeing unravel even now. And our later years is almost empty nesters. We still have one at home.
Yeah.
She came back. She flew, and then she flew back to the nest. So,
Back home.
but
Yep, it
in
does.
this season, we're seeing God's big picture. Just His faithfulness, His grace over us, and it's amazing.
I mean, usually through those really hard moments in our marriage, just the inner voices. You've got Satan's lies. You know, this isn't going to get better. He's never going to change. You're better off even not being here. I mean, all that.
Yep.
We become our can become a great critic, or it's just hard to make sense of all that. What were some of those kind of voices and the inner critic that you were hearing? How'd you guys really deal with that?
I know for me, Jeannine mentioned about attempting suicide. I know for me, suicidal thoughts were very strong also in my mind
So for
at the
both of
same
you,
time for both of us. And because I realized my role as a pastor, role of the leader in the community, and how that whole testimony I felt was just totally damaged, and like God would never use me again. My time, I even remember telling the Lord, the ride was good. I'm done. I don't think I can be used ever again because of how I hurt a church and in ministry, my wife, my children.
Yeah, kind of
And
thought you were
so-
disqualified.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
And my narrative in my mind was the world would be better off without me. That was my narrative.
Yeah.
And so many times I'd be driving home from work, and I would just, something in my mind would tell me, speed as fast as you can and just drive off this bridge and just end it. I mean, it was, the thoughts were very pervasive. And so the narrative that was playing on in my mind was failure in ministry became my identity.
Yeah, I
And
am
right.
a failure.
Yeah, I am a
Versus
failure
I
instead of
failed.
like exactly.
Yeah.
And that whole crazy cycle that we go through, right? And I was defined by a single point of failure in my life. Not, hey, it was a failure, move on and let's see the grace of God through this. No, you're a failure and you'll never be able to do this again. So that was the narrative in my mind playing.
Yeah. And same thing. But what helped us, as you can tell, we were not good for each other.
Yeah.
We could barely, get through a day without, hurting one another with words. That was when it was so, so important for us to have those mentors in our life, speaking life into us, and really bringing us back to a place of working through those trenches in our minds and filling them with truth in God's word, and looking at people in the Bible like David and those comeback stories. And
Paul, who was
Yes.
formerly Saul,
Yeah.
who did.
Yes.
You think about what he did, the murdered Christians.
Yeah.
And yet, look, it's
Yep.
Paul. I mean, geez, is
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
anybody, next to Jesus?
Right.
Maybe Moses. But I mean, Paul, my goodness.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
because I made some choices in college that felt like I had totally disqualified myself from ministry. But I remember rereading about Saul. And and I knew the story. I mean, I knew that well, but just going, wait, say that's your junk that you're trying to convince me of. Look what God, what? Why am I putting limits on what God can do? I mean, you need that. You need the healing. You need that good season
for sure.
to where you dig in and do that work. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard not listening to the lies that are
battle
floating
those.
around
It is
our
a battle.
brains.
So what was the turning point for you guys? Kind of went through this dark season, stepped away. You said it wasn't a short season, but what was the turning point to where you started to be filled with hope?
I remember driving home we were living in Denver at the time because that's where we moved to get some healing and restoration, and I was working up in Boulder. So I was driving home one afternoon, and we were going to have a conversation that evening about divorce, what divorce would look like.
Yeah.
So I remember stopping at a flower shop and felt like just the Lord to say, stop, buy some flowers, buy a card. And so I remember I bought some flowers and cards for Jeannine. Came home, and we were in the kitchen in our little tiny apartment there in Denver. And I told Jeannine, I feel like we need to take the option of divorce off the table. And remember, we were both looking at each other like, well, what do we turn to? What do we look for? What's our other option? And I remember telling her, it's God. The Lord he's our option. He's our only hope.
Yeah.
So for us, I think that was a big turning point, is taking divorce off the table. It wasn't an option anymore. Whereas before, we were always talking about separating, divorce, what was going to look like, where are the kids going to go, how's this all going to work out. As soon as we took the divorce off the table, that was the turning point for us.
Wow.
Yeah. And I also believe that going through our class that we finished, and we were like, whew, we got through that one. But we had it was like a victory night of testimony. And when we got up and testified, and seeing like the impact it had on other people, because in my mind, I thought, I am never going to talk about this. This is going under the table and just put it away. We went through the course, and we're going to be healed and move on. I never had the idea in my mind that we would talk about our failures and our hurt and our pain, but it's all over the Bible, right? Like, how would we be where we're at today if we didn't know those failures and the comebacks?
Right.
And I remember thinking, like, we have a comeback story. God has restored us, and we like to say He's not only restored us, but He has restored our story. And we love so much harder and more than like we ever thought we could, because it's all under the covering of His restoration power and in His mercy. And that's when we speak that to couples and we see that happening, it encourages us to do it more and write a book and be on a podcast. So back then it was just getting up and telling a testimony.
Yeah.
And that was the first step. And then we ministered at a MOPS group one time.
Yeah, they invited us mops.
Mops.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we saw what it did there. And then it was inviting us to a church, and we told our testimony there. And so we see that people need hope. Marriages need hope.
Absolutely.
And God's like, I want you to tell them.
So as you guys look back on your story, so this just that what your journey's been like, if you were to go back to go, okay, here's how we would rescript it, knowing that you're who you are because of how God's used the pain and all of that. But if you kind of went back, what are some of those big things to where you went, oh, you know what, now looking back, we would have done this different, or we would have not done this, anything like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think us knowing a lot now, obviously after 30 years of marriage, looking back, and what we encourage young couples who are going to get married, do the hard work of conversation. Put in the communication prior to marriage. Talk about your family history. You know, the whole family history thing that we do in premarital counseling, right? We didn't have any of that. And so go back and do some good premarital counseling.
Okay.
Take some of the budget of your wedding planning invested into marriage premarital counseling. That's what we would say.
Mhm.
We would do that for ourselves.
Yep.
Yeah.
That for me, that would be huge, because obviously we've seen the benefit of us now doing premarital for couples and seeing the success rate of that, and all the studies point to that. So I think
Yep.
talking back to our younger selves, get into some good premarital counseling, but have the hard conversations.
Let me ask you: is as you look back, what's an example of something that you would have wished would have come out? Not that you would have ended the relationship, but maybe
Would have spent more time
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
I think our self-image. I
Okay.
think we were. He was very damaged in his upbringing, a divorced family, and he had a lot of things he had to deal with. There was so many things that I had just pushed down and tried to just be that face of who everyone wanted me to be. That I never ever was able to deal with those things, and I think the same for you. And those things didn't come out until, in the storm they came out, and then we realized, well, you really need healing. Even before you're healing your marriage, you really need healing yourself, Jeannine. You really need healing yourself, Monty, and working on ourselves so that we can work on our marriage. But if we would have had that prior to, we would have been able to work on those things before we said I do at the altar. And I'm sure those things will, those always work
sense.
through in marriage, because things will come up. But I think a big part of it would have definitely been
good.
taken care of.
That's funny. We often will say, hey, if you could go back and have a conversation with that younger you standing at the altar, what advice would you give, yourself as you stood there? And that is exactly what I always say. If someone says, well, what would you say? Is just you've got some damage. You've got some baggage, and that's really going to hurt and injure you, Erin, and your marriage. Man, deal with that stuff now. So I love the encouragement of just saying, take some of your budget that you were going to spend on your wedding and apply that to something that's going to help you stay together for a lifetime, not just for that particular day. I think great advice.
So if there's a couple listening who is in crisis, maybe they're in just that dark season in their marriage and individually, what encouragement would you give them?
I would say to them, and this is going to sound harsh, it's not just about you. There is a bigger picture. You have an opportunity to influence beyond yourself, starting with your family. If you have littles at home, if you have teenagers or adults as children watching you, it's bigger than you. And Jesus is there for you, yes, and he's going to take care of you. You're his daughter, you're his son. He will take care of you, but just look beyond yourself and see the bigger picture that he can just make beautiful. You're seeing the mess right now. You're seeing the back of the tapestry.
Yes.
But if you allow him to weave himself in your situation, it will be beautiful.
I would encourage couples who are in a dark season right now in marriage to reach out to somebody else that can help. So many times we reach out to people who can't help us, and we share our struggles and nobody can help. I would say reach out to somebody who can really come alongside, whether it's a marriage mentor, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a trusted friend, whether it's seeking professional marriage counseling and getting some marriage coaching. Do something, but reach out, because so many times when you're in that moment in life and that dark cloud is hanging over you, there's the fog and you can't see beyond yourself. But to allow others to come in and to be able to speak life and give you a different perspective of where you're at was so huge for us. And so I would encourage couples, reach out for help.
That's so good, because so often couples feel like they're the only ones, they're all alone, there's no hope, and yet reaching out to community, because we're created to be in community, is so helpful, because you get other perspectives, but making sure it's the right people,
Exactly.
that it's those who can give you hope, that can help.
For sure. Because the enemy likes to isolate.
Yes.
He will want to isolate you, and he will want you to just, again, look inward and be like, I'm not telling anybody about this. This is my secret and our secret, and we're never going to say anything. But there's so much power in confession and finding that person and allowing someone to bear your burdens. Like, that's God's word. Bear one another's burdens. So fulfill the law of Christ. Like, just do it. It's uncomfortable. It will be uncomfortable for a little while, but then you you make that bond, and they'll carry you through.
I love it.
So good.
From a bag of Lay's potato chips to now 30 years later, just
Yes.
we just are so grateful for the hope that you guys offer. I mean, one through Christ, but just through your story for others who we all face those hard moments and those dark seasons, and just to hear how you guys navigated that. You never gave up. You took divorce off the table as an option. And it's amazing because it's such a beautiful example of what God's able to do when we humble ourselves before Him, when we turn to Him and just say, it's not just about us. It's just not about me, Lord. Where do you want us to go? So thank you. Thank you for the work that you're now doing with couples. Again, what a beautiful part of your story. How you did the hard work and now you're blessing so many people.
And especially in our own community. I'm so happy to know that there are others like you that are fighting for marriage, even here in Colorado Springs.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all what you do as well.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Such an opportunity to learn from someone who has been through crisis and is willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
I love when she said, we just weren't restored, we were restored.
Yeah.
God restored.
That's a great line.
Yes, I loved that.
Yeah, because it's so true. And I love that God will use our story if we're open and available, and to where when we get to share our story, how we can talk about, the good, parts of our marriage, the hard, the difficult, these tough seasons they were talking about, and yet always making God the hero in what we learned from Him. What did He teach us? And so as you, Erin, work with so many couples day to day who are in the middle of a crisis. Again, either it can be an acute issue, in other words, something has happened, maybe infidelity or something, or it's just been a slow fade. And all of a sudden, many, many years later, we feel like such married roommates and so disconnected. So either way can launch the marriage into a crisis.
Yeah.
Kind of what's a formula? What do you do? Where are you trying to help this couple go? What helps?
Well, first, I would say it's important to really figure out how this is impacting me as an individual.
Yeah.
And what is going on for me. If I'm seeking an extramarital relationship, or there's an addiction or a crisis, what's happening inside of me? How is it impacting me, or why am I coping in the way that I am? But really, the healthier the individuals are, and the more that the individuals can dig in to what is happening for them and strengthening and understanding all of it, then focusing on the marriage is so much easier, because you know what the two individuals are dealing with, and they begin healing and restoring. I know Monty and Jeannine talked about, they were both super depressed and even suicidal. And trying to work on the marriage when you have two depressed, suicidal individuals is really hard.
Right. And I think that is one of the biggest things I've learned, even walking through some tough seasons in our own marriage. The temptation is to say, let's heal the marriage. Let's deal with the marriage. Oh, we've got to keep the marriage together. And oftentimes within that, then the individuals are ignored. It just doesn't work.
And often there are schools of thought that would say, no, healing the marriage is going to heal the individuals. So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. But I firmly believe that the individuals have to be really digging into what is going on in order to create a healthy marriage.
Yeah. I think for me, just, in that Jeannine is that social studies teacher for middle schoolers. I'll hearken back to about the only thing I remember from my social studies teacher, and that was the phrase that was uttered when Cortez, got to the Americas to find the Inca gold, whatever. And all of his crew wanted to leave and return, and he uttered the, burn the ships. I think for King and Country has used that as well. But I love that, because what the message was is that we're not going home in our own ships. So retreat is not an option.
Right.
We're going to push forward. And when we return home, it's going to be in their ships. For me, there was something really powerful about when Jeannine talked about that they took divorce off the table. It wasn't an option. And that was so important when we walked through that, because really the message for you and I, there wasn't abuse and things like that going on between us. But it really was, retreat's not an option. We've got to push forward. We need to get the help, the support. We've got to dig in and figure this out, because we didn't want to live in misery.
Right.
So we wanted to deal with this stuff. And that was a really helpful mindset for me. So burn the ships kind of was a big battle cry for me back then.
And I can remember the day you came home. I think I've talked about this before, and said, hey, we're going to take divorce off the table. It's not an option, that we are going to figure this out. And for me, that created such a place of security that regardless of what is going on, and again, it wasn't abuse, it wasn't severe addiction, it was, we didn't know how to manage conflict, and it put us into crisis. That really, it brought the security that, okay, we're going to both figure this out, both individually as well as within the marriage. And I was even thinking, as Jeannine was speaking, that we had the privilege and the honor. You either do the work before you get married and you assess and you figure out what are we each bringing to the table, or you do it after.
Right.
And sadly, it impacts the marriage and the other person. But thank goodness we had the joy and the difficult and all of it of walking through our individual healing together as a couple, that we got to be part of that process for each other.
Yeah, and that's a
Not that it was easy.
Yeah, right. It wasn't, but I would say it's a beautiful part of our love story. How God used that, and who we are now as individuals and as a couple, shaped from those really hard early years. So I'm grateful that you stood by me,
and vice versa.
We got healthier as individuals.
And we're still growing and still on that journey.
We are. So maybe for you, if your marriage is in crisis, we hope that Monty and Jeannine's story has really showed you that God can do just not amazing things, but really impossible things.
And we encourage you, don't give up. Fight for your marriage. And I encourage you, surround yourself with people, godly people, who can fight with you for your marriage.